Yeah, I appreciate you jumping on the call and wanting to do this, Ryan. It's been, well, obviously it's been a rough time in the last couple of weeks with what's happened with Eddie. And I don't know, it just like like we were saying when I text you it, and like even more so for you because you live kind of close to where everything happened, and you've been a point of contact for a lot of your friends to reach out to find out, what happened and stuff. And then being involved in going to going to see the aftermath. And I know I know that you don't really want to speak much to what happened in that specific incident. And I think out of respect to family and colleagues and everybody involved, I think it's maybe a little too soon, but it raises a point, doesn't it, to realize that we this happens all too often. And when it's not close to home, it you read about it, and you maybe read a headline or read an article, and you think about it a little bit, but then it soon kind of gets put to the back of your mind, and you carry on, and maybe you don't speak about it with friends or colleagues because it wasn't close to home. But then when it is close, like what happened, it sticks with you a lot more. And when you know people, well, even like a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, was even closer and had contact with Eddie, and it just brings everything so close to home. And then you do feel like you want to talk more with people close to you, and make sure everybody is with it when they're on the job, like every day, because it's so easy to get complacent and to just go through the motions, isn't it? So the first thing that I wanted to speak, well, kind of let you maybe expand on is the amount of people that who have had an injury or worse than that. Like I know that you've known people that have died like while on the job and within the industry and stuff. And I know that you're a person that safety is a huge part of your life, of your job, of your role in the industry. You've always been a person that I've admired and looked up to, especially when it comes to safety. And I know that you want to talk about this. And when I feel like when you're speaking of something that you know about a bit more intimately, like you know details, and it's close to home for you, then it does resonate with people more than if you just talk about something that you heard and you don't really know about. Whereas if you can talk about how it affected you and your friends around you, I think I think for a lot of people, it's that is it's the only way you're going to get through to people, is when you kind of maybe tell a story firsthand, because you can preach and preach and preach about safety and about the right way to do things, safe work practice and all this. But if people have been in the industry for 10, 15 years and haven't changed yet, with all the preaching and all the training courses they've been to and all the changes in standards in the industry and things like that, then they're probably not going to change without something hard hitting or drastic, I believe. So, what are your feelings?
Well, you've triggered a lot of thoughts, and memories, and just feelings through experience and my years in various capacities in the industry. And one point in particular, just about the experience of loss, takes me back when I was at art school at Humber. And one of my instructors, that was like his first class, he went through his whole experience with like someone that got him into the industry, basically. He wasn't on site when the incident occurred, but there was barely a dry eye in the room, like the way he told the story and like how it impacted everybody and how it, it changed his whole trajectory in the industry. And it moved him into a really good position because he made a big impact on me, and he's made an impact on numerous others and continues to do big things in safety. But it just, I can't lean too hard on the shock factor of the incidents themselves, and I don't want to keep experiencing it. I wish I could say, this was the first one close to home, but it's not. It's not the first person close to me that has lost their life on the job. And it doesn't get any easier. And I feel like you're right. I feel like it has an impact initially, and then it fades away, and then we're back to our same old habits and taking chances. But it is an important piece all the same, because I think it seems to be that reset. And I wish it wasn't a fatal incident, because you see how many people are impacted by this. Someone from out of country, in this case, who hasn't been in the country long, is working for a couple of different companies, and pretty young guy, just in his element, really. And it's not, I don't think it's about, like, we have to remind ourselves it's about people. This whole, like, the reason I'm still at this is about people and the connections we have. It's not about finding fault in anything that Eddie did, but I think if we just like refuse to take a closer look at any of the underlying like causal factors and like take an interest, like surely there was something to learn here. Anytime I hear someone say like, oh, it's a freak accident, it's just like, what a waste, there's stuff going on that we should be inquisitive about, because we don't want somebody's partner and their parents to get that news. It's just like, he had his whole life ahead of him. Like, and no matter how many times you hear these, it's this, the same chain of events. The hard hat or the boots at the scene of the accident, the flowers, the gathering, it's tragic, and it's like it brings out the worst reaction in you, and you feel like, okay, this is the catalyst. This is the turning point in everybody in the room that has been witness to this is changed forever forward. And to some extent, I would hope they would be, but I think it's just such a waste to not look deeper into it. And a lot of the things people have been saying all along that we've known about, the deep, causal agents, the root causes, whatever you want to call it, cultural factors, attitudes, they persist. And I think this is one small piece of it, and I hope it's less and less a piece of our broader attitude towards safety. What that means, I think we're way too casual about what people keep repeating to us about our major underlying issues that need to be addressed, and we just choose to set those aside because we need to be competitive, and the trouble in recruiting people and keeping people in the business is really hard. You're just trying to keep the wheels turning. I get all of that, but ultimately what's at stake, I think anybody that's been involved in these major incidents, the reality in these workplaces is when the incident occurs, the people directly involved, in most cases, leave the company within days or weeks at most. In rare cases, some of them will stick around. I was just going to get bombed by my daughter here. There's an inevitable cameo at some point. And then the rest of the operation is just never the same. It's not a fun place to go to work. You're reminded every day about the underlying issues you knew about, but like that was just kind of what made the company. And eventually some of those people move on. Many of these people that are impacted directly never return to the industry. And I feel like the attitude is way too casual to any of the companies that are one step removed. You know, they might be communicating with the company that had the incident, you know, past co-workers, that sort of thing. But they're just like, well, it can't happen here. You know, that was a thing over there. You know, we're all, you know, will remain vigilant, but the you know, those deep root causes, I see it everywhere. You know, you see parts of it in your own workplace, and the hard part is, what do you do about it? You know, if you're in a position as an owner or a manager or a safety training person or even a crew leader or supervisor, how do you change that? Because that's the tough piece. It's like you see somebody that's like their go-to is one-hand chainsaw. Okay, tell them they can't do that. You know, and we're all adults, and you hope you can equip people with access to training and best practices and some education along the way where they'll come in contact with these ideas. Hey, there's been a lot of incidents associated with this type of practice, but it's rarely those one thing, like just the act of one-hand chainsaw. I'm not going to go on a tangent about that. I think it's been beaten to death, but it's the underlying attitudes of go, 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 the culture of you know, work through when you're tired. Just go nonstop productivity. You know, show you can crush it every time. You got the underbid. But you run yourself to the point of exhaustion, and that's when these work practices, kind of at the surface level, the low-hanging fruit of the one-hand chainsaw, or shoddy rigging practices. Here we go. Okay. There you go. Get your wave in.
Hello. This is your cameo appearance, is it?
There.
How are you doing?
Let's say hi.
Good.
Good. What are you doing now?
Just sitting on my dad's lap.
Nice.
Is there anything you want to say about tree climbing then?
Anything you want to say about safety in the tree industry?
Okay.
You done?
This one.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Thanks for coming. Yep, it's inevitable.
That's real life right there.
Yeah.
That's and go. That's actually important because that's ultimately that's exactly what you're protecting when you go to work every day and you're thinking about, should I do something the safe way or should I just try and shave a little bit of time by cutting a corner? Is you need to like, if you have children, you need to think about that, don't you? And you need to be going back there every night to provide, to look after them, to be there as a parent, as a dad. So like,
Yeah.
that's a huge reminder. And she might have come in not having a clue what you're doing, and
Indifferent.
yeah, exactly. But that's exactly that's the part that I think when people are at work, they almost like go into autopilot and almost forget about all the responsibilities that they have outside of their job as an arborist for that, you know, like maybe for the 8 hours, maybe for a half an hour, they just forget because they're so, you know, into what they're doing, which is fair enough. But like you gotta have a reminder. And if it takes like carrying something with you as like as a visual reminder that you have people around you that like would be absolutely destroyed and would ruin their life if you had a major accident, let alone if you never came home again, like that. This is what we're talking about. And it's not you know it's not trying to preach to people that don't want to hear it, which is, I don't know, like I would say the majority, like definitely more than 50%, like they don't want to be preached to about safe work practices and about, oh, you could do this a little bit better and whatever. But if they view it slightly differently, like other than, oh, I'm being called out every time somebody sees me, one hand in a chainsaw. Like if they switch from that mentality to, I need to go home with both hands at the end of the day, or I need to go home with, all my ropes and equipment intact, which means that I haven't cut myself out of the tree and all this kind of stuff. Whatever it takes, you need to think of something that will make you do that. And surely if you have children, then that's like a no-brainer. I don't have children, so I'm only, I don't know, I'm just saying what I presume you would say as a parent, and but without that, that first-hand knowledge. But it seems like,
yeah, but you got a community and you're valued, and you have family, and like it's just putting yourself as a parent into their shoes. Like even though you're older, you still got lots ahead of you. But the impacts on the community as the whole, like you see these events play out, and it's tragic in ways you can't comprehend. And when you're younger, you're not thinking about that, obviously, and you're taking chances. But to what you're saying is, it is a part of it. But I think we need to get out of this cycle. We got to stop learning this lesson. It will come to you eventually. And the wild thing is, you have this conversation with anybody that works in any other industry, and they think it's just like unbelievable. It's like, somebody directly who's had a workplace incident and died. Not only one, but multiple, that's unheard of. And what we're asking for, if we're saying like, this is the gut check we need, it's like, let's turn to aviation. And it's like, oh, we need a plane crash once in a while, just as a reminder of why safety is important ultimately. Like, no, that's bananas. And we really need to make some adjustments. And I've got some ideas from having worked in some just a broad range of different tree care operations, both private and public sector, and in various sizes. And you're just trying things based on other people's ideas, based on the nature of the own workplace you're in, and continuing to access education and training, and seeing what sticks. And I can report some positive developments in some cases, but ultimately you need a willing audience, and you need people in positions where changes can be made. You can't expect people to push from the ground up unsupported for too long, because eventually they're going to leave your place and go someplace where that attitude is accepted.
what so from somebody working in the private sector, running a residential, like mainly residential tree care company, I kind of see why there's so many companies out there that rush their employees and put pressure on their employees, and then the employees, or even if you're a contractor for a company, they feel the pressure because, at the end of the day, like estimating on a tree job, on a pruning job, a removal job, is your best guess of how long is that going to take. And sometimes you're not thinking of how long it's going to take a certain person. If you're running a company that, you know, employs 10, 15, even 100 guys or whatever, then you're not pricing it for an individual. So when the crew goes there and the crew starts, and they have, say, if you're working an 8-hour day, they get 6 hours through the job, or even like they get halfway through the job, halfway through the day, and they know that that job is bid for a day, whether it runs over a little bit and they have to pay them a bit extra or whatever. They know that they're expected to get that job done within a day. And if they get halfway through the day and they just cannot see the light at the end of the tunnel, I've been there myself many, many times, and you just, for whatever reason, if you have that mentality, your mind just go, I know your processes just go to pot, and you just start rushing in every way you can, even though like when everything's going well and you're you know, you're doing everything systematically, you're being way more efficient, and ultimately you're getting the job done as quick as you possibly could, but it doesn't feel like you're rushing. And then when you try and rush, you're being way less efficient, and the job probably ends up taking longer, but you feel like because you're rushing, you're sweating, you're exhausted, you're shouting at people, then you must be working faster than you were doing before lunch, or let's say. And because, you know, if you're working on a job where you're expected to be done in a day, and then you know that you're going to go back to the yard in the morning and be given another job, I feel like that's where the rushing and the cutting corners and the doing things unsafely comes from. Like, where does it have to start, and how do you get your employees to have that switch in mentality, and even, I suppose, even the employers, that like do you have to make everybody switch to make it a safer place to work, and ultimately make the industry safer? Because that's the one driving factor for, I imagine the majority of incidents, fatalities, what in the industry is just pressure and time and rushing and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the appropriate starting point is, if you're serious about making change in your business, is acknowledging that it's not it's a continuum, like it's a story. Imagine a storyline in your business. So you experience this event that's unpleasant, you underbid the job, everybody's like scrambling to get out of there on a Friday of a long weekend. And then, it's looking like we're going to have to be back and wrapping this up tomorrow morning first thing. And, you know, that's a thing that's going to happen. But if that's the regular in your workplace, that's a choice, right? And I think we've all experienced, I can't speak for everybody, but I think many of us listening to this podcast are probably going to acknowledge we have been in situations where it seems like you're just on a cycle where this just occurs over and over again and nobody seems to learn from it. I think if you're in a position where you can make that sort of structural change in an organization, is to acknowledge and say, this is a continuum. We're going to invest some energy to get us off of this loop we're stuck on. And we don't know what that looks like yet, but the first step is saying, yeah, this was unpleasant. We screwed up. It put a lot of excess pressure on people, put people in a difficult space where they were running at red line and asked to just give a little bit more after a long, hard week leading up to it. And this is going to not only address some of our safety issues, but our retaining staff, recruiting new staff, making it look like this is not a frantic, frenzied workplace all the time to new people that come into your organization. I think it terrorizes some people. You can see it like when they come into larger operations and they get hooked up with the wrong crew. It's just like, this is mayhem. I cannot get out of here fast enough. So that's all those things should be seen as like failures in the programming of your business. Frankly, if you're sincere about making change, anyways, and you're going to be stuck in situations ultimately where you're going to be tested. People are going to make mistakes, but if you're taking an interest to make adjustments or try new things, try things differently, or reach out to some external body for some input, there's lots out there, but instead we just kind of try and continue to learn trial by fire and not really do much about it. I think look into like the search and rescue community and the way they go about their tasks, I guess they call them, is a lot of the time if things went right or didn't go right, they have after action reports and they kind of have a debrief on it. Like you don't need to be that sterile in your approach, I think, but having that type of approach is the key. If you want to take your business further, I'm not talking about scaling up in size and equipment or any of that, but I'm talking about stabilizing, just running at redline all the time, because those are the conditions that lead to accidents. So you look to any other high risk industry, and that's the thing. It's like we keep ending up in this situation where people are at redline for long periods, and it tests kind of the equilibrium of resilience. Like whenever you have a period of intensity, you need a period of relaxing to maintain that balance. But if things get out of whack, you get into trouble. So that's kind of the fundamentals of what needs to change. It's like taking an interest in addressing the problem is step one, or maybe it's step two. Step one is acknowledging that there is a problem.
Yeah, and especially from coming down from the management or the business owner management level, it's definitely where it has to start from. And so sometimes, obviously, they have to account for themselves and they have to make their own decisions. Some people just generally are have the personality where they can be maybe manipulated more, or they won't kind of speak out, and they just feel pressured and they won't stand up for themselves. And if you have a company that employs somebody like that, and they're just piling the pressure on over and over again, you can't, like, not everybody is going to kind of stand up to you and say, look, you're driving me too hard here, you're driving the whole crew too hard. Somebody's going to make a mistake. Maybe that will never be said to you. It doesn't mean it's not happening. And it's funny because in this industry, the turnover of staff is absolutely, seems to me like astronomical. I hear about it all the time. Like, people can't keep hold of staff, and I think a lot of people that can't keep hold of the staff feel like that's just the industry, and that's just an easy thing to put it down to, because they're always looking for new staff and people are always leaving, and they decide, oh yeah, this industry, you can't keep hold of anybody. But if you know somebody that runs a very good company, very tight ship, whether it big or small, if they run it correctly, if they invest in training their staff, if they're not, like you were saying, if they're not redlining their employees like day after day after day, if they're appreciating their staff and if they're investing in their staff, then I know companies that have kept hold of employees for 5-10+ years or so, and it and when I run my business, I try and really kind of encourage the guys to learn more. I try and train them just every day, like even just talking on the headsets all day long. Just like, it might just seem like conversation, but a lot of it is giving little pointers here and there, and I know they improve from that. I know that they appreciate that, and coupling that with having getting along with your staff and not treating them like they're just another number, and not treating them like labor that are just coming in to do a job. If you treat them like skilled human beings that they are, and if you invest in them, and that's one of the biggest steps to retaining your employees to start with. And I feel like one of the biggest things for me, like running my own company now, is when little things happen, or when you hear of incidents, or even worse, like you hear of fatalities. I can't imagine being the owner of a company where somebody has seriously hurt themselves, let alone worse than that. And even if somebody cut themselves with a silky saw, which could be terrible or it could not be too bad, I like being the owner of a company, and somebody at work doing a task that you've given them to do, then calls you one day and says, oh, I've done this. Or you get a call from the crew and say, so and so has gone to hospital, can you call his wife or girlfriend or whatever. Like that that day, I just never want that day to come. I just hope that I'll never have to contact somebody's partner and explain that they've been in an accident, and feel responsible because they were working on a job that kind of you sent them out to do. Like, and maybe, I don't know, maybe that's my personality, and maybe that's me knowing of various different incidents that have occurred, and seeing or hearing from people about close calls they've had and all this kind of stuff. But I don't understand how people are running companies and just are completely ignorant to this, and then they'll send their guys out, and maybe they'll be working on site themselves, and just watching the guys day after day do things completely unsafe. Maybe not even provide hard hats, maybe not provide ear protection, maybe everybody's using chainsaws like an absolute cowboys. Maybe like we've all seen it, and I just don't understand how as a business owner you can let that happen or even be part of it. I don't understand the mentality to that. So as a business owner, I'm always trying to give my guys a little bit of knowledge each day we work, just so that they're slowly learning day after day. And some days it'll be like a really obvious tip that I give them on being more efficient by doing something. And some days it'll just be, I don't know, they'll just be picking up things subconsciously by seeing me do something, or just, I don't know, just conversations we're having about past experiences. And yeah, I think it's so important to be part of your crew, even if you're not out on the job site every day. Just make them feel like a team, and like it's not just a clock in, clock out, rush to get done, rush to get home. There's like, they're never being invested in there, and like that's why people come and go. Like if you have a company that has a huge turnover, that's probably something to kind of look at. There is, are you creating a good environment for your staff, and are you investing in your staff? And because if you've got high turnover, it's not, and to be honest, a lot of people might say, oh yeah, maybe they want more money and I can't afford to pay them more money. But to be honest, money is very rarely a factor of why people leave a company and join another company. Because if you're talking about hourly wage, you're probably not going to leave a good company where you get on with all your employees, all your colleagues, you get on with the management team, you get trained. You're probably not going to leave that for a couple of dollars raise in pay and join a company that doesn't have that same working environment. It's usually the environment that's created that will keep an employee. Sorry.
Yeah, I want to jump in on one of the points you made just about more or less spending time with your crew. I think that's one major gap in industry is often the owner or manager or even territory reps if you're in a larger organization, or even supervisors or safety and training staff. They end up in a situation where they don't have the time to spend with their staff, which can be okay as long as you have other mentoring people in your organization. But when people are absent of opportunities to learn, in addition to low wages, as you put it, and other cultural issues, personality dynamics, they keep sticking me with so-and-so who's just a brute and thinks I'm a waste of space, then yeah, that's like, I'm not going to hang out, frankly. That's not my idea of a good time. But the missing piece in many workplaces is that connection between the business owner and the vision of the business, and taking a sincere interest in the development of the staff. That connection is missing in many cases, and often when the owner or management is present, it's either in a disciplinary purpose or it's like, I'm here for a good time, not a long time. You got to make that commitment, and that's one of the key pieces in culture that is missing often, and where crews have the opportunity to kind of operate without that oversight for long periods of time, and there aren't inputs to kind of feed that continuum where they're gradually working towards improvement, accessing outside trainers, or even sitting them in a room and watching a webinar here and there. Like, it's not hard, it's not expensive, but most people are doing nothing. Or they've had one experience and they've decided that's not for us, so we're just going to put that over here and carry on thinking we know everything there is to know about how to make money slaying trees. So I think you're obviously preaching to the choir. I'm preaching to the choir. I don't spend too much time worrying about the bottom feeders. I think what's going to drive change with the bottom feeders is leadership on the high end of the market. I think when they see high-end service providers picking up the cream, like doing sought-after jobs for high-profile clients, that's attractive. Or it's not. Maybe they're just interested in the easy kills where they flog firewood. That's great. But even there, I mean, I've seen some improvement. Like 5 years ago on the island, you would have seen a lot of those one-man bands. They're working in jeans, not wearing hard hats. And now, like, pretty frequently, most of the time anyways, you're going to see them wearing full PPE. The rest of their site is a shit show, but that's a start. But I think we really need to model where we can. If you're in an organization where you can show that leadership, just keep pushing. It's a storyline that you're shaping. There's no end point. There's no like, okay, we've met that bar, we can all relax. If you're interested in finding gaps, there's no end to opportunities to make adjustments to your program, and a lot of it is going to be people skills. Both as a manager, I think a lot of managers and owners don't recognize, hey, I've kind of learned through, being on the tools, and then had enough of being in a big business, went and started my own show, whatever your story is. But you may have your tickets, you may have some professional development specific to the trade, but lo and behold, you got some big gaps in people skills, working with staff, human resources, project management, what have you. That's a whole other opportunity, and you may find like, wow, I've been doing it this way forever, and no wonder like it's a revolving door for staff. This is me. This is what I've been doing, and if you're humble and take an interest in your own delivery, I think you'll find you've got plenty of room to move as well, and that just continues to feed into your program. If you have a more comfortable workplace for everybody, believe it or not, you're going to be more productive. You're going to have access to better clients, better work. It's a more sustainable, higher quality of life situation for everybody involved. And it models that leadership that, believe it or not, other competitors are going to gravitate towards.
Yeah, because if you, I mean, so talking about leadership for a second, there's one person throughout my entire career, going back to being in the UK, working in Australia, coming to Canada, doing various different roles. And there's one person that stands out as, I don't know how he did it. I don't know if it was just, I presume it's just his natural personality, but maybe he's done some development along the way. And the guy who I'm talking about very well, actually, lives over on the island. And when I worked at Bartlett, when I worked over here, and I started doing some work in like in the sales part. I was out on the tools like 2 days a week, and then I started doing being an arborist representative for them for 3 days a week. And as soon as I kind of took that role on, he would come over and he would spend like a day with me probably every couple of weeks for the first few months that I did the job. And he would call me like during the week when he hadn't seen me. He would, like, when something had gone wrong, like he would call me up and we would talk through it. And he was the most approachable person that I've ever worked for, who you also feel is kind of that much higher up in a company. And where if you kind of are fairly low down in the company and there's like various different levels in the hierarchy, it's almost like a lot of the time the very higher ups aren't, you feel like you don't want to talk to them, they're not too approachable. And he made himself available to everybody, and he was the most friendly person, and he would never kind of react badly. He would never say a bad word. He would listen if you had problems. He would give you solutions if you couldn't figure out how to do something. He would provide the training that you needed. He would provide people to give you the training and the tools that you needed. And it's stuck with me ever since, like how good of a people person and manager he was, and still is. And out of all the people that I've worked for, like I imagine pretty much everybody that you've ever worked for, everybody that most people have ever worked for, you work for them long enough and you always kind of see their flaws here and there, or you think like, oh, there's an area that they could improve, or they're either too strict or not strict enough. They're too hard on punctuality, or they're very lax, or they're they're two one way or two the other, and you always have an opinion whenever you want to complain about somebody because you've had a bad day at work. You can find something to complain about. Whereas if you're a person that not many people have a bad word to say or your employees, then you've kind of hit the jackpot really. But so if you work on your management skills, I feel like I have so far to go as far as like running a company and managing my clients, my crew. But I try every day. I try and look back and analyze the way that I acted and myself. And the worst thing for me is when I do get stressed, when I feel pressure from clients, when I feel pressure from a job. That's what I'm trying to work on the most, because that's where, like we spoke about earlier, that's where I know that accidents or incidents, injuries will happen when I'm starting to, feel the stress and feel the pressure of getting a job done, because I know the rest of the month is booked up, and if we don't get this done today, when am I going to reschedule it for? Or do I have to upset all my other clients and push everybody back? And so many things go through my head, and for me, it's trying to learn how to deal with that kind of pressure and just kind of just put it into perspective. How important is it? And as soon as I start thinking, it's not worth anybody injuring themselves over. It's not worth, throwing a log or a branch without checking first just to try and save a split second because you're rushing it. Like I'm constantly trying to check myself all the time, and I know when I'm starting to feel the pressure, because in the moment when nothing has happened, no accidents have happened, you feel like you want to start rushing. You want to up the speed, up the pace of everything, and it does take you kind of reining yourself in and pulling yourself back, and that's one thing that I personally am trying to work on. But from a management level, I'm also trying to work on my management skills, how to interact with my crew, and how to keep morale up even when when it's maybe a bit of a shitty job. How do you just keep morale going? And then if you can get through those crappy days, then you're winning. Like you're enjoying the really good days, and then you might get a terrible one every once a month or something. But if you can get through that and have a laugh and a joke about it, then your staff are feeling good.
Can I tell a little story?
Yeah, go for it.
So yesterday, this kind of brought this whole idea full circle, and like my perception of what it meant, I guess, was very different between these two situations. But probably 10 years ago, working in production just on this a large job, North Saanich, sort of South Island, but more of a rural area. And there's a big crew there. We had a lot of work to do between sort of deadwooding, dug firs and removals, dug firs, a lot of dug fir action. And in North Saanich, they're tall. A lot of them are leggy, kind of exposed. They clear away a bit of forest for development, and then you got to do some edge tree work. So I'm doing my thing, banging out trees, pretty much in my prime, I would say. Like that was a good spot, a good crew, a lot of capable people on that at that shop. And there was one ARP that had come in from sort of the interior of BC, and had kind of worked on different trees for the most part. And he had gone up and started kind of limbing up this dug fir, working his way up just spurs and lanyard type of thing. And he had made it up almost to the point where he was at a point where he could make a, send a top. And he ended up coming out, and he approached me and said, like, I don't feel comfortable with this situation. They're just like, there's no tape. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he just felt like it was really awkward and he didn't feel safe in that situation. And my point looking back now would be like, be that person on the crew where someone can feel comfortable coming to you with a vulnerability. That wasn't like necessarily a statement I was wanting to make at the time, but I feel grateful that I was giving off a vibe that, amongst all these other alpha dudes slaying trees, he came to me and said, I'm not comfortable in this situation. I'm like, no problem. Went up and finished it off. And we had a good working relationship. And at the time it was just like, this guy was really sold as being like top tier arb, and I'm kind of surprised that happened. But that's like, I just need to check my own baggage, like you just get into this cycle of bullshit that like, this is feeding the cycle, is this attitude. If somebody has a hang up with something, like, who's to say they don't have other strengths? And what if they don't have other strengths? It's not an event. They are continuing to grow, right? And you are the mentor. You can either like stifle that growth, or you can support it and give them a safe environment for it. Now, come full circle to yesterday. So I spend a lot of, like, I try and get out in the field a fair bit, but I don't do a ton of climbing. I'm fortunate that I can still tree climb in my job description. But yesterday we had a weather window, and we had some big, ugly cottonwoods in a park that have had, they need some work. They're probably like 110 feet tall, but there's a group of like 6 of them. So myself, one of our contractors, and one of our climbers on staff all get together. We each take a tree, and I chose a tough one, and I hadn't full stop, haven't climbed in 2 months. Jump up into this thing, and like, some things didn't go well at the start of the climb, like just wasted some energy, and it's to be expected when it's just silly little mistakes, and redirecting ropes more times than you need to, it just burns up energy eventually. And then I end up like, I got this big limb I got to remove, and so then it's a rig show, and we're rigging from 85 feet, so it's the 200-foot rigging rope that's 5/8, and that burns up some energy. So chunking out big wood, and while this is happening, I'm thinking of Eddie, right? Thinking of Eddie, just like, I'm feeling it, and I still feel like I'm in my relative comfort zone, but I'm reaching the edges. Anyways, get this big piece rigged off, multiple pieces, make the finishing cut, and then I'm up in the other side of the canopy knocking out wood, and the battery kicks it on my saw, which, not surprising, like, it's just taking larger wood with an electric husky. It's eventually going to run out, but I'm at like 90 feet. Like, you know what? I'm done. I'm spent. I've been going for 5 hours, and I'm just like, this is important. I'm just going to eat this. And I went down and I asked for help. Just like the field arborist, who's a top-notch, like a very strong climber. He had already banged out 2 cottonwoods, and like asked him, like, if you feel like doing another, like, I'm done. And he's like, yeah, I'm in. And that's kind of the attitudes we need to shift. I think if you feel totally comfortable saying like I feel like I'm reaching the edge of my the safety factor here. What you were talking about earlier, like, you just start rushing and you start getting really sloppy, and you start cutting corners, especially in the canopy. And then that's when you're like, okay, we're not paying attention to rigging angles now. you don't realize you've been in the canopy for 5 hours on nothing but coffee. That's when it goes wrong. So normalize doing that. Just, hey, I'm seeing something in me that I'm not comfortable with, and I'm happy to work a rake for a bit or run ropes. And if you're in a workplace where you got somebody standing by that can jump in and fill your shoes, that's one thing. But in a lot of places, that's not the case. It's that additional pressure on the climbers. Like, we send you out knowing full well that, if a rescue needed to occur, you don't have anybody. You've got somebody that's, been in the organization for a week that can't run ropes or anything. So I've dealt with plenty of that. It's unreasonable expectations. And if you want to take an honest look at your company and think about the pressure you're applying on people and the exposure to the worst possible situation, that might be a starting point.
Yeah, it's actually, man, it takes a lot of pride or swallowing of pride to do what you did. And so in that situation, I mean, you're so experienced and you've been in the industry so long, and I imagine so secure in yourself now that you swallowing your pride and saying, oh, do you fancy taking this because I haven't climbed for 2 months, was probably not so hard in that moment. But I imagine there was still a little bit of that was there.
It was nagging at me. And the worst part was, so that all went down, and I guess word had gotten back to my boss, and he chose that opportunity to tease me about it in front of the crew at the end of the day. I'm like, you fucker. But you know what? Just eat it.
Yeah.
Whether I got a kid or not, I got a community, and that cares about me, and I care about them. And, it's probably important that, just what's at stake ultimately? Like me having a bit of a browbeating or what could happen? Like, the stakes are high. Like, what we do, the stakes are high, and the proof is in the pudding. Like, we look at the incidents and we keep talking about the incidents. It's like, we cannot deny that we are exposed anymore, and we haven't been able to for a long time. So yeah, it didn't sit well with me at first, but now it's like, I'm a day later, I'm just like, I was gassed. Like, I was done. Just like, get out of there.
Yeah.
Going down is easy. It's just like, wrap out, no problem. Like, had I have chose the other route, like, it's a fork in the road, 2 options, carry on, and there's a decent amount of work left. Fuck it.
Yeah.
Easy for me to say, because I'm in, I'm in a comfortable position. I've got, better wages now where I'm at in my life. And like, if I got fired from some arsehole boss that wasn't going to tolerate that sort of thing, then that's a real tough position to be in. And I would think that some people are still in that position in this day and age, which is brutal. But I have to recognize that not everybody's in my position and can make that choice.
Yeah, there. So the decision you made, there's so many factors there, aren't there? That, like, one, the initial factor is the swallowing of your own pride, asking for help, seeing those warning signs of fatigue, and seeing how much there is left to do, and how your body is kind of starting to struggle to cope, and you just starting to, like, be drained of energy and all that. So that's like the first thing you need to look at. But then, so in your situation, you knew there was an option to come down and somebody to switch out for you, whereas so say you've taken all that into consideration. Oh, I'm swallowing my pride. I'm I'm feeling tired. You've noticed all those things, but then on top of that, you're a climber and you know that there's nobody on the ground to ask for help. It's almost that almost just the answer for you, doesn't it? I've got to keep going. Like there is almost no choice, unless you're willing to call your boss and say, look, I'm absolutely done. There's no finish in sight. I have no energy left. I'm starting to make mistakes. We need
That's why
to.
you gotta be that boss that makes it very clear that mistakes are going to happen, and that you would never ask that somebody put themselves in a position where they take themselves past their limits. If you're the kind of boss where people can approach you and feel comfortable approaching you, I don't think they're going to, maybe the odd person will abuse that privilege, but like, frankly, I think it's such an honorable gesture that people are going to appreciate that, and they're not. Well, that type of attitude alone tells me that your attitudes to how you treat your whole business are going to be those that don't lead people into these situations in the first place, or if they do, they don't make it a regular ordeal. That's the key piece. If you are operating solo climber styles, that needs to be addressed. It's just like it can't be unreasonable expectations on a single person to carry the day. And if you don't agree with that, then you as the owner can jump in my place, get up there and carry on. But I don't think enough people realize that it's just take it back to workers' rights, the right to refuse unsafe acts. That is the big red line. You are at your breaking point. That's the red line. You have the right to refuse unsafe work and not be disciplined for it, including for a small employer. And it sucks that it needs to be said, and we can't assume that any one event that's the key factor, but it often is. But you shouldn't have to go to the very edge to push that point. Hopefully you've got an owner that is looking for opportunities to bring change to their operation and make it a more sustainable workplace for everybody involved. And that's one place we can turn to. Don't put too much on one person's shoulders.
And it seems from this conversation, just from us been chatting for however long it's been, an hour or so, is that it has to start from the boss level or the management level, because just those things, like imagining ourselves or you being in the shoes that you were in yesterday, but if you didn't have somebody to replace you on the ground, you have to be comfortable to call whoever's in charge to say, look, I can't do this. And like you said, more importantly, you as the business owner or manager have to have already cemented that approachability in your company, so that people will know, right, I'm too fatigued, but my boss says call him if ever it feels like it's getting too dangerous, too risky, that kind of thing. And I almost feel like if you're listening to this now, you should go into work. You should get your colleagues together, go into work and have the conversation with whoever's in charge when there's no pressure, when you're not, like, maybe on a Monday morning, on a Wednesday morning, whenever. But before you've started the workday, before there can be any pressure applied, have that conversation with your boss and say, look, if I feel like I'm too fatigued, or the job is just maybe slightly out of my skill level, it needs something extra and I don't feel comfortable doing it, can I call you and say that? And can I call you and maybe even call the job off midway through if that's what it takes? I just want to know that that option is there, and how you would take that and how you would respond. Like, I think having those conversations when there's no pressure, you can't really have that conversation when you're in the moment and you're like, oh God, what shall I do? Because a lot of the time you would have the conversation in your head first and actually talk yourself out of making the phone call, because you just assume what the other person's going to say. You play the conversation through your head before you have it. So I think having it when there's no pressure, and having it when there's a group of you, and asking, can I approach you, and can we call the job off if it gets dangerous?
I love where you're going with that. It totally links in my mind to if it's like relationship dynamics. You've never been given training on being in a relationship and living with a person, or parenting. It's like trial by fire a lot of the time, and to an extent you can go out there and learn quite a bit, and it's definitely a really shitty idea to try and learn while you're in the heat of an emotional response with a partner or with your child. But it's all the same for a small business owner. Like, if you're just learning as you go, the steps can be really slow. So learning communication skills, like you're saying, are number one. And this idea that everything needs to come from management or an ownership, yes, to an extent. Like, people that have the power to change need to exercise that power, but the people within the operation need to push them in that direction to some extent, I think, too. Like, having the right personnel come in and kind of feel empowered, and they may be connected to different outlets that the owner or manager don't have access to, and can introduce them to new ideas. I think it's a two-way street, but just recognizing, like, you can't know it all, and probably you don't know a lot if you're like me and started dragging sticks to the chipper, or working under a tree climber or tree faller, and kind of learning from the ground up, and then you're put into a position of leadership, like, and oh, hey, have you taken any like actual leadership training, or management training, project management, human resources? No. And then you walk into the room, it's like, oh yeah, seen that. Yeah, it didn't pan out well. Didn't necessarily think that was the answer to it either. So much like if you're serious about working on your relationship and having better communication with your partner, or maybe addressing some of your own baggage from how you were raised, and what you might be passing on to your children. Think about the baggage you may have taken on in the workplace that you're perpetuating. And there's courses in every small town, every medium-sized city that can focus on this level of issues with the human part. And like, we focus so much on the technical skills, like it's beaten to death. We're well qualified. We've got numerous references and resources to turn to for information. We know where to find them, but we can't talk to our people, and we can't create a good work environment that is both safe physically and emotionally.
Yeah. Did you going back a little bit about what you were talking about, being in a position where you don't have a ground crew that can climb? I don't suppose you haven't to listen to the podcast I did with Jeff, the last one I did.
It was my goal to listen to it this week. I saw it kind of popping up in my feeds, and I was really looking forward to it. It just hasn't fit into my week. And actually, my coworker and our mutual good friend Laura had very good things to say about it, and I'm looking forward to digging into that. But no, I haven't yet.
Yeah, I was just gonna bring up the point that, I mean, so number one, like Jeff, I just respect hugely for agreeing to, to come and talk about it with me. He'd obviously, taken a while to come to terms with everything that happened and analyze himself and the incident and everything around it. But when he spoke about the guys that he was working with and the fact that they got up to him and got him down within like 15 minutes and got him down just for the ambulance to arrive and to put him on a stretcher. I just thought, like, you don't often hear about that kind of dream situation where we all hope that if ever we're in an incident that your ground crew could be that efficient and that like clear-headed to climb up to you, set yourself a system to get down on safely, and then transport you off with the medical professionals and stuff. I just thought it was so important to hear how he described his ground crew dealt with it, really. And just I don't know too many people like very close to me that have had such a bad accident that they've needed to be taken off to hospital. But it's something that we're always talking about whenever you're talking about safety is, I work with the grounds person that doesn't really know how to climb very well, and you don't feel comfortable that they'd be able to get you down and that kind of thing. And that's commonplace in the industry, in a lot of companies, and like, especially if you're training your grounds person to be able to climb, and they aren't quite there yet, and even if they've only just learned to move themselves around the tree, you can't really expect them to be able to come and rescue you from, especially if your body's like pretty immobile at the time. It's just something that you kind of, I think a lot of people overlook because you're not seeing it on a day-to-day basis, so it isn't at the forefront of your mind, I suppose. But
Yeah, it sounds like an incredible story, and this goes to the point I was saying about high performing tree care companies modeling leadership that drives the change. And I think a lot of other high risk industries that have faced down that challenge and like recognize like we are not going to externalize our risk on other agencies that may or may not be prepared to perform rescues. That we really got to take more seriously. I mean, large international companies continue to send crews out with one climber and one like has newly been equipped with PPE and oriented worker. That continues to be the trend, and it's frankly absurd. It puts people in a bad position mentally, because you're always thinking like, well, I don't have a lot of great tools to choose from here to fall back on if I make a mistake. Whereas if you come to work in my shop, like our crew, we perform rescue training and we're always trying new scenarios all the time. Like I know if a rescue ever needed to occur, like there is no one more capable and ready, and it just gives you a little bit more confidence and comfort. It's not saying you get complacent knowing that, but that they can face those situations. And not only that, but having that capability, if one of our colleagues in the private or public sector had an incident, like you'd probably be called upon, you know. So you want to stay ready, and you know it's terrible that it occurred, but silver lining, it sounds like, is a competent crew that was ready for a situation, like a traumatic situation. Obviously, they were prepared, and that's the difference maker. You know, that's the difference in the outcome and the story. And yeah, they're all still traumatized, surely, but this is a very different outcome. And I try not to lean too hard on those rescue skills, but if you're putting that same level of training to build capacity, to build resilience and competency in your entire team, from like the newest employee on up, it's just like, I want you to know as much as possible, and I want you to be able to apply all these little pieces into unique situations, and to, you know, have those critical thinking skills to react quickly and elegantly, and to be assured in your movements. And like that just pays off dividends. Like, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter if it's rigging or saw use or the care of your equipment, and just applying, like being able to tackle any job and do it safely and efficiently and effectively every time. Just put that energy into your people, and it's going to keep them in the business longer. They're going to have, you know, quality of life for their families, and I think that models out to the community, like, this is a safe place to come to work, and it's a fun place to come to work, and you can make decent money, and it's fulfilling, rather than the other message that, you know, oh yeah, oh, you're a logger, you know. It's battling that stigma. I can't imagine.
Yeah. And one other thing that you mentioned earlier about the just the incident and fatality rate in this industry. I meet so many people, especially here in BC, because the way that things work is that a company has to pay what's called WorkSafe BC, which is like into compensation for if people get injured at work. That's like a provincial thing that they pay out for people who are injured and go off on disability allowance and all that kind of stuff. And you hear so many people in the industry, especially, well, it's always coming from business owners, always whinging about how it's such a high percentage compared to all the other businesses. So arboriculture, tree work is, I think it's somewhere around 11% that you have to pay of wages, and compare that to anybody else working in pretty much all other fields. Well, not, I mean, I can't say all other fields, but working in a retail job or something, it'll be maybe 1%. And so you always hear company owners whinging of the high percent, but that is because of how often incidents occur. And it's so we need to acknowledge that, and we need to put efforts into training and those type of things, because the percentage of what we're paying against, you know, injuries and those kind of things is so high, because the incident rate is so high. And you know, it's not nice to have to take so much of your profit and pay the province or the government for that kind of thing, but it's because it's the nature of the business that we're in. So as a business owner, we have to kind of spin that and take it from what the negative that it might seem that it is, and taking away your profits into, and we have to use it as motivation to learn train and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that was its intent, was to motivate a change, and other industries have been really effective at it. They've organized, despite their differences and competition. They've organized. They've established their own industry best practices that have been acknowledged by the regulator. They've established curriculum through education, apprenticeship, training, what have you, or qualification. They've done all those things. They've embedded like a continual training and development program through continuing education type units. And they've been recognized. And that's industry taking ownership. I have a major grievance with industry in this province. There's been moments where it has appeared that everyone was going to come together and get behind one of these type of movements, whether it be through the education or the apprenticeship angle or standard practices, those sorts of things. An association was formed when the regulator made threats based on the rate of incidents at a couple of different stages in industry here in BC. And I'm talking specific to arborist practices. And I feel like we've had more than enough chances to make something of it. And, with this, the latest 2 incidents involving arborists in the last 2.5 months on the South Coast, I really think enough is enough. And I'm already participating as like a consultant on the development of an arborist activities regulatory part within WorkSafe BC. And I'm sure a few of us listening are privy to what its contents are, and it's going to be a pretty swift change. But what do you do? It goes back to that conversation, like what can you do as an individual to bring change to those cultural issues and habits? For me, the first step is like gaining rapport. You come into a new workplace, you're not going to like lay down the law, like shit's going to change starting tomorrow, right? If you can't gain rapport with the people you're working with, then it's hopeless. You can't be on the job site babysitting them every day. Gaining rapport takes time. But then once you're there, then what are you going to do? You've recognized and maybe documented the major issues based on whatever tool you're using to measure the regulation, if you have good regulations. In our case, not so much, but you'd be turning to safe work practices maybe. And based on that, how are you going to make changes? If you're in a position of authority, it may seem easier, but again, it needs to be sustainable change. And one of my coworkers asked me, it's like, I'll acknowledge there's people on my team that gravitate towards one-handing a chainsaw. It pains me. What are you going to do to stop them? I model what I want to see on a saw. It's very clear to them how I feel about it. I like to make it known that there's no expectation on my part that they need to be more productive, and if they feel they're more productive by one-handing a chainsaw, they do that. I would never communicate that. In fact, I would communicate that's exactly the opposite of what I want. And now you bring in the regulatory piece, like, okay, now we want regulation to drive the change. Well, we've allowed a lot of runway for industry to kind of police themselves and organize, and we know the changes they need to make. Industry can get together and advocate for that and persuade to the regulator and say, okay, we got a plan. Here's what we're going to do. And then we solve a lot of our problems possibly from that. But industry doesn't do that. And now we're at the point where regulators are saying, okay, well, the penalties of just insuring a tree care company in the province of BC are punitive. It makes it, it's a huge amount of overhead for a small company, large company, doesn't matter, to absorb, but it doesn't seem to ultimately have any effect. So now we're looking at regulation. You look at any other regulatory measure, and it's only as effective as the ability to get enforcement out into the field. Which, if you're familiar with the province of BC and the workplace at large, there's not a lot of prevention officers out there. Most of the work they're doing is like post-incident prevention work. You may have experienced a site inspection from a prevention officer. You may go your entire career never having seen one. That's kind of the state of the game. But I think it ultimately, we need to take ownership. Like, are you personally affected by someone losing their life going to work? He was making his contractor rate that day. Does it make any difference if he made $200 or $400? I don't think so. He's still 27 years old and lost his life, and we're trying to figure out, how to get him back to Australia. That's what's at stake. And like, industries, like, gotta fucking figure it out.
Yeah. So coming I suppose coming back around to the whole family thing and what is at stake. That's ultimately where I think where it's the only way people are going to change that haven't been able to change already is just to use that as motivation. But as like with what happened with Eddie, what from your experience will happen now with WorkSafe, and like what do they do and how do they go about investigation, and where does that lead to?
Can we take 2 minutes? I'm just gonna grab a beer and run to the bathroom.
Yeah, go for it.
No. I guess I just, from my experience in working with WorkSafe in, I guess, critical incidents, seeing how they respond and react to it, and then being directly involved. In a former employer, my role was as senior safety person. It was a pretty large company, probably about 65 employees while I was there. And yeah, I wouldn't say I had the misfortune, but a coworker had the misfortune of being seriously injured and hospitalized. And it's just being taken through that experience with a prevention officer. And it doesn't end at the job site. Of course, there's within 48 hours, there's a huge amount of work you need to turn out. And then they respond, and then there's this back and forth inevitably, and much of it is documents and follow-up investigation. But like, to look at one particular incident, the incident occurs, the response happens from first responders. As soon as first responders learn that it's a workplace-related incident, they notify. And this is not, it's not necessarily a WorkSafe BC situation. Wherever you are listening to this, you probably have a WorkSafe regulator that has a very similar response to occupational incidents. They'll dispatch their team, and if they have somebody that's a subject matter expert in arboriculture, they'll send them out, but in many cases they don't, so they'll rely on industry subject matter experts, and I've been brought in that role in the past as well, and that's not a fun place to be in. When your contributions are like, you never want to, it's not a fault finding mission, like it's not a personal attack, but you can't help but not feel that way when you would be brought into a situation to investigate an incident. So I just try and stick to the facts. I generally would not have access to an individual to conduct an interview. I have, but it's generally, if the scene is still preserved and intact, you're just collecting information, as much information as you can, and then you go back to the desk and start to analyze the physical evidence with the interviews and try and piece together something out of it. So WorkSafe, in this case, is doing very much that. Initially, in this incident that recently happened here in Victoria, or Oak Bay, the scene wasn't safe for them to enter, so my colleagues at a neighboring municipality had the not a very pleasant task of going in and performing a make safe, just to allow first responders and the coroner and WorkSafe to enter the scene. So it's pretty harsh, but they're trying to preserve as much of the scene as possible. If you're ever, witness to it, hopefully you never are, but if you ever are witness to an incident, preserve as much as you can. Like, just obviously to do first aid and do everything you possibly can to help the person involved. And beyond that, everything just stays as it is, because that is our best possibility of gaining information that can help other people avoid a similar incident from occurring. Take notes, whatever you can remember. That's really important stuff. That'll help get to the why sooner. From there, WorkSafe comes in. They get photos of everything. They measure pieces. They check out rigging and chainsaws and safety features. They conduct interviews with individuals, as soon after the incident, because it's still fresh in your memory. From there, there's a lot of note taking. If there is a person on staff that is in a safety role, they'll be asked to come in and conduct their own initial investigation alongside WorkSafe. Just collecting very similar information, your own photos and notes, and then it's back to the office. Within 24 hours, you'll have a request for information guaranteed from WorkSafe, or whoever your occupational regulator is. They'll be asking for information immediately on the personnel involved, and if there's any mechanism that's a potential focal point of the incident, rigging, for example, biomechanics. So if we're rigging, because we're not structure climbers or climbing anything engineered, there's an expectation that there's some understanding or training provided on biomechanics and where anchors are being installed. Rigging angles, all that sort of thing are going to come into play. If there's chainsaws involved, then expectations of background on training, were they working within their capabilities, and after the initial mechanism of attention is focused on, then you're going to start getting into your own workplace occupational health and safety program. So they're going to be looking for details on your broader program, but what kind of competency evaluation was performed for the people involved to determine that they were capable and confident to be in the environment and the conditions they were working in, what kind of training was provided specific to these and these issues, whatever the targets are of the specific incident. So it's, like I say, it's just back and forth and back and forth. And if you don't have a documented safety program, like if you're not doing safety meetings or you don't do tailgates or somebody comes into your program and you don't have basic information for them, or you do a work trial. Work trials are all the rage with subbies and it's sort of higher level climbers, the production, the $40 an hour and up type of crowd. They are coming in and doing these work trials, but like guaranteed in most of the workplaces that are doing work trials, there's no documentation from it. And that is such a missed opportunity. Just like, let's do a work trial. These are all the boxes I'm going to tick to see that you did. Boom, you've got a document that shows you did a competency assessment of who's coming into your operation. But if you are the person documenting somebody's competency, you need to prove your own competency. So important caveat there. But you get the big picture I'm kind of spelling out here. It's long-winded, but it can take months and months and months, depending on the situation. So if it's like an equipment failure, that can be a whole different beast. There can be textile analysis and they can go back to the manufacturer. That's a different thing. But if it's like a human thing, then it's like, what were you doing in the workplace, or what weren't you doing? And were you doing everything possibly that a reasonable business in the industry would be doing to prevent this incident from occurring? It seems like hindsight type stuff, but in general, where these incidents occur, like, I hate to say it, but like I could walk into any of these situations and like I know what I was going to find if I started probing through the back end of the business. And I've been in positions where I've had to investigate these incidents alongside WorkSafe or where there wasn't an injury, just internally. And even there, where you've got a good program behind you, you should be walking into that situation like, I am looking for opportunities to prevent this from happening ever again. And I'm not going to stop until I find it. And it's not a personal attack. Like, get it through your head. It's not you. It's us. It's our cultural baggage as an industry, and it's probably been passed on to you from your mentor and you didn't even realize it, and you're continuing to do it, and we are continuing to do it. But let's take a long, hard look at ourselves. It's like I never want to attend another accident scene. Just the feelings, like you are going to work and you've got these feelings in your chest, like, I don't know that this person's okay. All I know is that they left here in an ambulance and here I am. And I'm sure WorkSafe, like, imagine that's your job, right? You just go around to accident scenes and that's fucked up. It does a number on you.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you mentioned it before, but you have to think about the people that are there on site and witness such a thing and are part of an incident, like the guys or girls that were the part of the crew on site when what happened when Eddie passed away. I just can't even begin to imagine like what they must go through while on site to have witnessed something, to then be there on site and, I don't know, come to realization about what's happened, and then on top of all of that emotion and all of those horrendous things that have just happened, after a few weeks, then to reevaluate your own life, your own career, your own family. Like, I can't imagine you would go back to work. I think I imagine you would just pick another career and just be like, I'm out. I can't be doing this. Like, even I wonder how many people actually go back and try, and then within that first week they're like, this is just, I can't do this anymore. Because seeing somebody climb a tree for the first time after such a terrible incident, and just watching them go about their daily practice, which is probably very routine, using all the techniques and all the tools that they've used every day in the past, watching somebody do that, you'd probably just be expecting the worst to happen with every movement that they make. And you just like, I can't imagine how you would get over that, and how you would go back to being the person you were before witnessing such a tragic event, and how you could come to be that same worker that you were before and go through the motions every day. Like I imagine you just have to have a complete change of career, change your life, and not have that reminder every day of what you witnessed.
Yeah, and I've come in, what I said earlier, just about talking to people that are working in different industries and having those conversations about, there's been multiple people that are directly, a small number of people that are known to me basically have died on the job. Now, outside of that, one step removed in my circle, I can, go around the room of the people that have been at this for as long as you and I have been, and almost all of them will have a direct connection to someone who has died in the workplace. It's mind-boggling. And like you've heard the stories, I've heard the stories, and like we've gone through their complete experience, from whether they were directly on scene involved in the incident, or it was a coworker and one crew was in a different part of town when it happened. It doesn't matter. Like, it's trauma. And like it's just looking at the scene photos from over in Oak Bay with Eddie, like the journalists are taking shots while the crew is still on site, and like just seeing the head and hands, and the video footage, you can see them just like walking around, sort of pacing aimlessly, and like that imagery is just like, what is going through their heads? And they can't leave. They're there. The police need to take statement. WorkSafe needs to take their statement. And after all is said and done, like as of mid last week, I know that tree was still standing. Like, you want to talk about a difficult situation. Like, for a medium-sized tree care company, they're so deeply traumatized that they can't go back and face that tree and finish it. And they can't reach out to subcontract it out. Like, that's terrifying, It just, like, I can't go near the place. Like, we went there, there's a big I don't know if you heard, but there was a big gathering of local arborists. We got together and just said a few words for Eddie. And we all, like, I was just walking up to the tree. It's like, yeah. And seeing everybody together, it's like seeing how moved everybody was. It's just total silence, looking at the tree. The pieces are still, like, everything is still there. And it's just, you think back to all the shit you got away with, if you've been doing this for 20 years, you got away with some shit. And Eddie just, he was not lucky on this day. And all the ingredients were there, and it was, maybe it was luck of the draw. But again, I mean, I got to look at this and think, we got to stop doing this. And if there's something to learn from here, and you know, I know from my experience in investigating numerous incidents, there's always something to learn from it. And do we do anything with it, or are we just taking a casual attitude in that, you know, it won't happen to us, we're above that? That's, you know, that's for the bottom feeders, those types of incidents. You know, it's bullshit. It'll happen anywhere, anytime. You can have the best safety program in the world, but if you get complacent, it's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think so. I mean, the week after it happened, I got the two guys that work with me to come round to my place, like before we started work on the Monday morning, and I just sat him down and I was like, so the one guy, Tom, he's very new to this job. He's been in the industry, like working with trees for quite a long time, like in nurseries and doing consulting, but not on tree crew. And so I was a little bit I was almost a bit worried to bring up the subject, but I knew it had to be brought up about what had happened. I was like, we have to talk through this, and we have to just make sure we're all on the same page when we're out working together, and make sure that we're always communicating. And if somebody is having issues at home or anything, we're all on the same page, and and they know that they can talk to me if they're not comfortable with something. And I just wanted them to know that, and I wanted them to also just talk about what had happened without trying to scare Tom before he's even got his foot in the door in the industry by telling him like a fatality that's happened like pretty much right where we are in this part of the world. That's got to be the worst thing to hear when you've only been doing the job for like a month or so. But so I had the guys round and just kind of talked through it, and I felt like they were both like really receptive to everything we were talking about, and like both of them are on the same page, and they want to talk about this kind of stuff, and they want us to have this kind of dynamic when we're at work. And I want them to know that they can call me out on if they see me doing something that they don't feel is safe, or they can ask me questions about why I'm doing something if they don't understand. And and I just felt that was so important. But even talking with you, I feel like there's so much growth that I have to do in being a business owner, just from hearing you talk about coming from a side of like a safety training perspective, and saying it's expected that companies need to document everything they do. And even like having that chat with the guys, that's like the first step. But I don't have documentation that we sat down and we spoke about that and filed it away. I don't have documentation to say who's competent at what, and there's so much growth I have to do. And I understand why small business owners especially don't have all these systems in place, because they're too busy kind of trying to make their business work. And especially if they're going out and doing the work themselves, like they're racing around trying to like put out all these different fires and going and quoting and this, that, and the other. And then, but it is so important to just book out some time for yourself to make these documents that you need to have, ideally to prevent everything happening. So documents to say, right, I need to have a meeting once a week, and we need to talk about close calls once a week. And having that document is keeping you accountable for having those meetings in the first place. But then you also recording the meetings for a worst case scenario, something does happen. And even myself just talking to you about everything that's happened and about safety and culture we need to improve, I realize I have so far to go, but I've already started thinking about what I'm going to do, this week and this weekend, and get these documents in place, and document previous meetings that we've had, just to kind of kick it all off and get the ball rolling, because
I just want to jump in, like, on the whole paperwork thing. Like, I've in a previous position, I found myself in a place where I was managing documents, and it is not an enjoyable spot to be in. And a lot of safety and training professionals will know what I'm talking about there. I think you can build a really strong, simple bit of documentation that covers you, but it's more of a process thing for me. It's just like, I forget shit, so I need I need to bring it back to a core document that guides me along a process. So if you can lay out a simple safety program in as few pages as possible with as little maintenance as possible, that is, in my mind, the strongest way forward. You get into these convoluted situations where you've just got like a work procedure for every little menial task, and you've got inspections for all your facilities and all the different rooms, and it's just like a box ticking exercise. It's like, oh my goodness, we got all this paper to get through before the end of the month to be able to bring it to the Occupational Health and Safety Committee and say we did all these things. It's that that whole world, I think, is the opposite of what we need. I think you need, like, on a practical scale, you need some key documents, and I think you really need to talk to somebody who's lived it and kind of experienced and found what that ultimately looks like, rather than trying to build it yourself, to make sure that, one, you're covered, that it's going to provide ultimately what is needed by the regulator. But, like, fuck all that. It's got to be about outcomes. Like, what do you want your documentation to do? I want consistent results from the first meeting I have with a new employee. These are the things that are most important to our company. That you are provided this information, this training, and we're not going to do it all right away, but we are. And if somebody's coming in your program that claims to be competent, that's a really important document. Incident investigations, that's a really important document. So I think you need to take it to the fundamentals, keep it really simple, but keep it about outcomes. Don't get into giant binders. If you're chasing like a reduction in insurance premiums by producing a massive manual that meets the gold level program of occupational health and safety regulations, that may be well outside of your reach as a small business, and I don't think you're going to get much out of it. You need to get something that you can access and maintain, and you don't fear accessing and maintaining.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Something simple, but that checks all the boxes, and just kind of keeps you on track of where you are and where your employers are and where your equipment's at and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Inspections in particular, that's an easy one to build, and I think it's just a starting point. If you recognize that, like, you're not going to create one document that's going to be there for the rest of time, and that, like, it's going to evolve, that's a good approach to it. And the key is, rather than putting all the safety responsibilities on one person, everybody in your organization has involvement in that program. So one easy way for me to do it is I create the format for the PPE inspection or the rigging inspection, and I populate it. Like, take all the dirty work away. Like, I go through your bag initially, and like I list out all the products and when they entered service and serial numbers if you have them, and condition and so on. And then I just print out sheets. Like, your sheets are always available. So anytime you want to do an inspection, it's easy for you to do that. And that gets their buy-in. And we get good documentation from it. Not only that, but if I want to do a peer check, like you would do with Lola in the UK, it's easy to do. It's like it's already generated. So just thinking in practical terms, like, how do I make documents that people are actually going to gravitate towards and keep on hand and keep up to date? I think that's really important and not often talked about. And how do you get staff basically to contribute into your safety program? That's like one of the key questions I would throw out there. Is a lot of people, they don't tend to contribute much, whether they feel comfortable sharing or not, or they're not actively engaged in that type of conversation. I think finding ways to get them involved, asking for their input when you're making a decision on new products, could be a starting point. When you're building documents, just say you're building a process or a procedure or whatever it is, like that's the point to bring them in and get them involved.
Yeah, really good point. Because a lot of the time doesn't seem like the most exciting thing to be involved in, and sometimes it can seem like if you're an arborist, you don't want to be involved with all the paperwork after you've finished and stuff. So yeah, kind of introducing people and to something it doesn't seem so admin like at first is probably the best way to do it. But I want to thank you for your time, Ryan, this evening. And I know we've been going for a good couple of hours and it's time away from your family and stuff. So I really appreciate you giving your all your perspective and your opinions on everything we've spoken about, but especially, I suppose, off the back of everything that's happened recently, which is kind of what prompted us to do this podcast, because it's kind of so at the forefront of our minds, I suppose. So yeah, appreciate it, Ryan. And I wanted to go and see your wife and your kid before they get off to bed. So
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And if I could, just ask everybody, like, just do what you can, basically, whatever position you're in. You're gonna make mistakes and encounter resistance, but you gotta try. You gotta give that gentle push, no matter what your position is in the company. And the higher up in the company you are, I think, just don't forget you got that platform, and just try to make it better for the up and comers, please. And to Eddie.
Yeah, to Eddie.